And today is Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, when we honor the more than 2,400 service members and civilians killed in that attack.
Yeah, there are going to be events happening all around the country and, of course, in San Antonio as well to help pay tribute to those. Charlie Cooper has a look at some of the things going on a little later today. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning to the both of you guys. Yeah, in remembrance of Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, there will be a special guest actually at the U.S. citizenship ceremony that's taking place in San Antonio this afternoon. There's going to be 50 immigrants from 18 different countries who will be sworn in this afternoon, and the special guest will be World War II veteran Herbert Stern. He'll be speaking to them at this ceremony, and really it's going to be a big deal because he actually fled religious persecution during the war and immigrated to the U.S., where he joined the Army. Now, Stern later took part in the invasion of Normandy. Today's ceremony begins at 1:30 at the San Antonio Citizenship and Immigration Services field office. Now, there are also a few local schools who are taking part in Pearl Harbor memorials as well, just to pay tribute to the thousands of lives lost that day. One of those schools is Dory Miller Elementary. They'll be welcoming veterans and members of the Army just for a ceremony that'll entail things like performances, musicals, that kind of thing, and just honoring those people as they do so. Now, the school is named after Dory Miller, who helped defend the USS West Virginia during the attack on Pearl Harbor and was the first African American to be awarded the U.S. Navy Cross. So the ceremony at the elementary school will take place at 2 o'clock today, and all are welcome. Back to you guys.